me just remind you, my shit is just a little bit out of bounds in this motherfucker, you feel me? Yeah.
Welcome to another episode of Studies in the Fifth Dimension. Welcome to another episode of Studies in the Fifth Dimension. Today we are going over the Astral World lecture, ATSTOPOLIS. Connecting that to Heliopolis. And just giving you guys a basis for the symbols and everything that I'm talking about. Pretty much the whole summary is that we are the Titans. Okay, and in iconography and throughout history, I'm going to prove this through, different documents and different books and things of that nature, and then show you how in modern culture they're showing the Titans being used by this same force that we have been in not accordance with, but in disagreement with, in repudiation with, and we come from something that is pre-solar. We come from something that is pre-physical. When we deal with the sun, we deal with the fact that the sun is what creates physicality, is what sustains physicality, is what keeps us between that 400 and 700 hertz, which gives us these physical bodies, which entraps everything in this physical spectrum, which is the sun. And so when you deal with this, you have to deal with the fact that before we were in physical bodies, we existed on the fifth dimension. The sun that we had was, what you would call a central sun, but it existed in a higher dimension as the god and the goddess. And this is, all provable, and this is all things that I have experience with. So it's not just me going into books and not just me, talking about this shit and intellectualizing some shit. You know what I'm saying? It's like a nigga intellectualizing some pussy he never got. It doesn't make any sense. You know what I'm saying? You can tell the nigga just talking. You know what I'm saying? But no, I've been able to be fortunate enough to go multiple times to the fifth dimension to understand many things about myself and a lot of things in spirituality that we can do, and what to look forward to after death, beyond time, in a place where we are beyond our physical bodies. So this lecture essentially is showing how the elites or the powers that be are trying to use us, the Titans, the old, the old souls that are coming back and things of that nature, to keep the power structure in place. Because what's happening is, these, the ones that are awakening at this point in time, it's, if you're dealing with an authoritarian type system and you have any type of consciousness springing up into people that you're repressing or oppressing, you know what I'm saying? You gotta demonize that. You gotta, you gotta make that shit evil. That's what that shit is all about. And so this whole Travis Scott FIASCO thing is pretty much gonna be, what is the forehead and the forerunner for making, black people in particular, our people in particular, stay away from conscious things. Stay away from anything that they tell them or deem as evil, you know what I'm saying? Because they revolved a lot of symbols around Travis Scott that, just so happens to be our shit, just so happens to be our symbols. They raised him up as a god. And then they killed that nigga on, they destroyed that nigga's energy and shit, you know what I'm saying? They made it evil, they demonized him, you know what I mean? And that's what they've done to us. What I'm going to show is how, we go from being the Titans, being, and when I say that, this is some Greek mythology shit, but you got to get what this represents. And like I said, I'm going to go in. So let's go ahead and go in on the symbols and shit, and let's get it done. Alright. So, Astropolis, Astral World, Heliopolis. So, astro, meaning or relating to the stars, celestial objects or outer space. World, a region or a group of countries. Okay. Helio, a combining form relating to the sun. Once again, relating to the stars. Astro, sun, stars, same thing. Polis, a city-state in ancient Greece. Okay, so a region. All right. So these words are essentially the same, mean the same thing. Sun city, sun world. Okay. Now we're going to deal with the god of the sun world, of the god of Heliopolis, who is Amun-Ra, who is Baal in Sumerian shit, who is Zeus in the Greek shit, and who is Jupiter in the fucking Roman shit. Okay? And as you can see through these different cultures, the same deity making that same fucking pose. Look at that shit. Each one of them copied after another. That's the motherfucker at the bottom and shit. The Dispy Terror to the left. The only character to the left or at the bottom is that character with the staff and shit and the fucking lightning. You can see it. Blurry as fuck. You know, here's another picture, older picture when he was Deus of ancient Greece. Ancient Greece. Okay. Also known as Jove or Jove. And then here's a little literature on Jupiter. Just the different names of God in different languages based on the name Zeus or Deus or Deus. And let's keep going. Now we're going to go to Atenism. Deal with the language of Aten, because what we have to do is we have to connect the God Jehovah with this whole thing too. Okay, so you deal with Aten, and a number of hymns to the Aten were composed during Akhenon's reign, some apparently by the king himself. They describe the wonders in nature and hail the sun as the absolute and universal Lord of all things. In particular, the hymn to Aten has become famous, as many commemorators have argued that Psalms 104 was inspired by or based on it. There is indeed a certain similarity in the type of language and the context matter suggestive of influence, but those who argue the two texts are the same are perhaps exaggerating. Whatever. That's dodge the hijack on that bullshit. Yeah, dodge the hijack on that shit. Let's go for it. I'm gonna connect the names. So, during the reign of Akhenon, Aten was installed as the principal god of ancient Egypt, and the worship of many traditional gods of ancient Egypt was rejected. The Aten was not a new god, but an obscure aspect of the sun god, worshipped as early as the Old Kingdom. We know it's a sun disk, but this is part of the sun god, so Jehovah, alright, comes from the word Adonai, which means my Lord, okay? So, Adonai comes from Adon, alright? Latin, Hebrew, literally my Lord, from Adon or Adonis. Adonis meaning beloved by Aphrodite, from Phoenician Adon, Lord, probably originally ruler, based to judge, rule. Alright, now let's go into the understanding of why Adon or Adonai comes from the word Aten, okay, and that Jehovah is Aten. And that Jehovah is simply a part of the sun, is an aspect of the sun god, or is the same sun god. Okay, so some scholars maintain that the term Aten, alternatively rendering Atan, is a form of Egyptian Hebrew dialect meaning the Lord. Ha-Adon, the Lord, Adonai, my Lord, equated with Yah or Yahweh. Sigmund Freud found great similarity between the new religion, the Akhenaten they tried to impose on his country, and the religious teachings attributed to Moses. For example, he wrote the Jewish creed, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord thy God is one. as Hebrew letter D is a transliteration of the Egyptian T, and E becomes O. He went on to explain the descendants from the Jewish creed could be translated, "Hear, O Israel, our God Aten is the only God." Let's move on. Okay. So now that we proved that, Aten is Jehovah, without a shadow of a doubt, now we're going to show that, you can find Zeus's name in the Bible, okay, and translated into different, so the original Greek shit, it was Deus or Theos. So, and then you get to the Masoretic Hebrew text, some different shit, but it's still the same God. Vulgate Latin, it's Deus, still the same God. And then you get to English, we use the word God for, in place of the word Deus, because that is what it is translated as. But in the beginning, God created the heaven and earth. And let's go to the Septuagint. Oh, where my little Septuagint page at? Oh, it's over here. Okay, cool. Tripping. Alright, so this is about the Septuagint. So the Septuagint is a Greek translation of the Old Testament from the original Hebrew. Given that the language of much of the early Christian church was Greek, many early Christians relied on the Septuagint to locate prophecies they claimed were fulfilled by Christ. The Greek Old Testament, or Septuagint, from the Latin Septuaginta, 70, often abbreviated 70 in Roman numerals, is the earliest extant of calling Greek translation of books from the Hebrew Bible and Deuteronomical books. The first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible, known as the Torah or the Pentateuch, were translated in the mid-3rd century BC. The remaining books of the Greek Old Testament are presumably translations of the 2nd century BC. So this shit is Greek, okay, showing the Greek connection, showing the Zeus in the actual Latin translation of the Bible, and any part of the Bible saying God is actually saying Deus or Zeus, and talking about this deity, okay. And then we got Baalbek, okay. So I just also wanted to show that Baalbek is also known as Heliopolis. So they're the same God, okay. Baal and Amun-Ra and all them gods are the same gods. So we're not there yet. Getting a little too ahead of ourselves. One second. Now I'm going to go to Gerald Massey's book, The Natural Genesis. Now, this is talking about us, okay? This is talking about our people. Now, when I told you that we are the Titans, I'm going to show you and prove to you that we are the Titans, and show you that we have always been in discord with this particular deity, okay? The deity that rules over physical reality. He only rules over physical reality. There is reality beyond physical reality, and we exist beyond that. We come from beyond that. We don't exist just as physical beings. Matter of fact, we don't exist. This is an illusion. We don't even exist as physical. We're beyond this shit. And when you get to the understanding and your awareness of it. Right now, most people's awareness are just as, the physical geometrical shapes that they could see every day in their day-to-day life. They've never gone beyond that and never thought beyond that. So let's go beyond that for a change, and let me show you a way. Now, when the Greek tradition relates that birds were first created beings, we can read that the statement by the bird type of Horus. A dual image of men who were the first divided to be distinguished, the human race who are described in the Babylonian legend as warriors with bodies of birds of the desert, birds of prey, and men with faces of ravens, the people of the west and east, or the 2 horizons of darkness and light which Soot and Horus represented, who were earlier than the foundations and the races of the 4 quarters. In the description of the 4 races, the solar god Atum-Ra repudiates, meaning is not in agreement with, the creation of the Nasi, or the Negroes, the niggas. The others, the superior men, were wept by him from his eye. Okay, the older race, the pre-solar, but the blacks came into being some other way because they were pre-solar. Okay. The Rudy had become almost red in the image of Atum. the Hebrew Adam, and they turned round on the Nasi, scorned them, and wrote their name with the foul black bird, the Nab of the soot Typhon. They of the later race and lighter complexion in all lands despised the earlier as Dacius, the people that grew in darkness, the blackskins, the enemies of the gods of light, the Nagas, the Typhonians, dogs, and monkey men. Okay? 6 days of creation says, 6 days of creation says, after these Adam was created, whom thou madest Lord of all creatures. Of him we all, and the people also whom thou hast chosen. All this I have spoken before thee, O Lord, because thou hast madest the world for our sake. As for the other people, which also come of Adam, thou hast said they are nothing, but be like spittle. And now, O Lord, behold, these heathens, which have even been reputed as nothing, have begun to be lords over us and to devour us. But we, thy people, whom thou hast called in thy firstborn, thy only begotten, in thy fervent love, are given into their hands. If the world now made be for our sake, why do we not possess an inheritance with the world? Now, they're pretty much just showing you how this is saying the same thing, how, we being the Nagas, the Typhonians, the Titans, the ones of, the pre-solar world and things of that nature, are scorned, by the lighter races and things of that nature, and detested, and have been, a lot of our temples and a lot of our, civilizations destroyed and things of that nature. So let's move on. But what I'm showing you is this has been an ongoing thing. Since this being took power here, since this sun, created physicality, okay, trapped us in this density. And there's a lot more to the story, when you deal with it from a metaphysical point of view, and when you deal with it from a symbolic point of view, when you, the very esoteric point of view, like an occult point of view, and then you deal with it from a logical standpoint. And then you also deal with it, when coming from the logical standpoint, you have to deal with the science and tie that back to the mythology, because that's the only way you can get an understanding when you combine all that. So let's go on. Okay, so now we're going to go to this part where it talks about the giants and the titans. So the first two correspondences to the fall of the 7 giants from heaven and the pair from paradise. The earliest deluge then is that of the giants, according to Bertani or Butterini. The Mexicans held that it was in the first age of the world that the giants began to appear on the earth. As it is said by Procopius Gazius, those whom the Hebrews mention as Raphaim but were by other people called giants and titans. The giants and titans of the foreworld. Okay, foreworld, like foreknowledge, deals with, like the forehead or the pineal, you know what I'm saying? It deals with the spiritual world. It deals with the world, the pre-solar world, okay? Who bequeathed their large fossil remains to mythology, were elemental powers represented by zoo types that dominated the dawning mind of man and frightening him with hugeness of the apex giant of darkness. Okay, let's move on. So the world of Soot Typhon, okay, Soot being the male aspect, Typhon being the feminine aspect, and the 7 in Egypt who preceded Tot, the lunar god. They came from the foreworld of the 7 constellations, which was both pre-solar and pre-lunar. Okay, hear me out, okay, pre-solar and pre-lunar, before the sun and the moon. Okay, higher dimension. And in which the time of the year was reckoned by the rising and setting of the stars alone in relation to the revolution of the 7 constellations with the Great Bear and Keph or Keb, and the heliacal rising of Sophis that was submerged by the deluge, and other truer timekeepers were appointed. In the South and Central America myths, the people are said to have migrated from the place of 7 caves, which was their motherland. This locality, called Chiz Maztac in the Mexican myth, is described as being where the beginning took place, and the stone knife Teopatl was born of the Great Mother, and fell from heaven as the first agent or opener in creation. The Quiche tradition has it that they came from Tulan, Zuvia. The 7 Ks. This is Atulon or Atlan. Okay, that's a whole nother lecture, but we're gonna keep going. Alright, so let's keep going. So it is the earlier races, however, who have preserved the most primitive forms of the myths. Those great astronomers, the Aborigines of Victoria, can shed clearer light on the matters than do the Hebrews or Assyrian legends. They have their stellar, lunar, and solar series of types. They say the earth is flat, and it was in total darkness until the sun was made by Pupurimbur. It was one of the ancient pre-solar race who then inhabited the earth, called the Nurumbun Utias, or the old spirits. These possessed fire, Kundalini, and had the same characteristics as the present race, but were translated in various forms to the heavens before the present beings came into existence. The celestial bodies, as well as the manifestations in space, are attributed to them. Certain animals, therefore, which typify them, must not be killed for fear of letting in the deluge. Well, let's go on. Now, the Egyptian Saturn was Sebek Cronus, who was an earlier form of Seb, and Sebek, the crocodile, was a type of earth. Thus, if Sebek had kept his place, Seb would have been lord of wood and vegetation rather than of earth, the earlier element. In the fifth creation, there are 4 quarters, 4 islands or insular climes, and a middle earth. The first elements are said to be the elements of the world. Plato at one time asserts that the heavens consist of the 4 elements bound together by analogy, and that the whole world is constituted from these. But shortly after he fashions the 5 figures and calls them the 5 worlds, theologists terminate the progressions of the highest gods in that place, and the Pythagoreans call the middle the Tower of Jupiter. Okay? So the mid-region or middle earth, the fifth was the element of wood, leaves, and fruit, was the middle central. Every degree of advance was registered in mythology. The name Seb also signifies soul, but this has 2 characters. In one, the vivifying soul of the earth, expressed similarly by the phallic type. This was the soul of Seb, and its mundane mere sap of wood, the soul of leafy life. Seb acquired his starry soul as Jupiter, the god of the mid-region, a morning and evening star. With respect to the middle positions of the soul, different interpreters explain it differently. Some say that the middle is the center of the earth, other that the moon is the middle, other that the equinoctial is the bounding breadth of the world. Against all these, however, Porphyry and Jeblicus write, blaming them so for the understanding of the middle locality of these divine men. Likewise, Porphyry, indeed assuming this to be the soul of the universe, interprets the middle according to the physical essence, the chronotypes having now become psychotheistic. Okay, this is the part that I actually wanted to get to. So, Saturn is the planet of Earth who rules at midsummer, and Jupiter is the planet of wood who reigns in the east and rules in the vernal season. Jupiter is Seb in his planetary character. Wood was the 5th element, and Jupiter is the 5th of the planet. Now remember that Jupiter is the 5th of the planet in the series of 7. Okay, just hear me out. He's the 5th. Alright, Jupiter, dealing with the wood. Seb, covered with foliage, corresponds to Jupiter, represented by wood. The relation of the 5th element, wood, to Zeus, the Greek Jupiter, is shown by the oak and his edible fruit, together with the cornucopia of plenty, being sacred to him. Okay? Alright, so in this part right here, and then so in his exaltation of the solar type, which was the latest perfected one, Hindu writer asserts that the sun is a source of time, and that which was before the sun was no time. So what all these different cultures are trying to say is the same shit that I've been saying, that I've been able to piece together and then experience for myself. We come from a point before this world was physical, before there was time. You know, time is a measurement of the frequency that we exist in, the 400 to 700 hertz. But when we exist beyond time, we exist beyond this illusion, which means we exist beyond this fucking hologram, nigga. Because this is a hologram. So they say before the sun was no time. This is the language of the latest race or religion in all lands. When safe in heaven at last the deceased exclaims, the Osiris takes the time of heaven. His time is that of the whole creation. His beatitude being expressed by a figure of time that was perfected. And here the final type of the various divinities is the sun as Amun-Ra, the generator and father of souls, who was Atum in one code, Osiris in another, Abraham in Israel, Surya in India, and Hu in Britain. Proclus observes that in every divine soul likewise there is time, since Plato says, Phaedrus, they survey through time, real being itself. Chaos precedes creation in mythology. The elementary powers were rulers in chaos, the domain of lawless force, discord, dissolution, and timelessness. The first creation represents the passage of mythology out of chaotic space into the fixed world of time, conveyed by the fixed stars being called and impersonated as the beginningless lights, the Anagra Roca of the Avesta, in contradiction to the movers and periodic revolvers. Okay. Alright, the hermaphrodite genetrix of the blacks, whether in Africa or Australia, meaning just dual-natured, is one of the ancient Typhon in Egypt, the earliest form of the producer in space and time, the one alone whose children were the undivided, undistinguished mongrels of promiscuity. As goddess of the great bear and the hinderer, part north, she was the thigh, the backside, and her type is the tail. Hence, the men, tribes, or races who date from this beginning were derided and scoffed at in later times as the men with tails but without kneecaps. The Jews were reported to be born with tails. In China, the Maozi, the aboriginal children of the soil, are credited with tails. The wild tribes of Africa, the Kagats and the Pyrenees and the Coata Tapuya in the South America, are considered to be the people with tails. The men of Kent were called the long tails. Bishop Bell says Englishmen had perpetual infamy of being considered men with tails through lying legends. The people of one country after another had shed the tails themselves, threw it behind them in the face of another backward country. The belief that Cornishmen had tails is yet extant in Devonshire, when Jewish father cut off the tails of the future progeny in a symbolic representation. Hold on. Alright, now we got to talk about Prometheus. Here we're in a book called Pacts with the Devil. I forget what the name of the author is. So here we have a parallel with the Christian story that is very close indeed. Prometheus the Titan, seeing what a sad plight mankind was in, living in darkness, resolved to defy the other gods and bring man the gift of fire. He climbs to the home of the gods and steals fire in a tube, carefully carrying it down to earth again. He presents the fire to man and teaches the people of the world how to use this gift. The inhabitants of the earth now had warmth and the ability to cook food and were appropriately grateful. The gods, however, were not pleased. They outlawed Prometheus and, as a punishment, chained him to a rock in the wilderness to torment him. They placed him with two enormous cannon birds that would rip at his body eternally while he eternally healed so that they could begin again. Here we have a powerful supernatural being bringing a forbidden and life-changing boon to the human race. Like Lucifer, he is truly the light bringer. Also, like Lucifer, he's cast out of heaven and relegated to a kind of hell. Of course, all of this is done in a rather different order than in the Christian myth, but the essential elements are the same. The big difference is that Prometheus was looked upon as a hero, and Lucifer, for performing the same kind of service, you shall be as gods, is looked upon as the incarnation of evil. This says something deeply disturbing about our attitude towards the universe and our place in it. We should point out a major irony. Not only did Dionysus and Prometheus contribute to the myth of the devil, but they were equally major contributors to the Jesus myth as well. Both gods came to earth and brought new knowledge to man. Both died for the effort of one and was resurrected and ascended to heaven. These are only two of the nearly dozen dying gods whose cults were looted to create Christianity. Prometheus was the subject of major revival on two occasions. First, Milton's Satan has been widely compared to Prometheus in his heroic attitude of unrepentant rebellion and assertion of self over authority. Milton himself would be appalled by this, but as Blake said, he was obviously of the devil's party without knowing it. The second revival came during the Romantic period when Bryan and Shelley, as well as the numerous lesser lights, devoted major works to the Firebringer. While these works weren't openly satanic in form, they were in spirit. And when some of the period was described as Byronic, what was meant was devilish. Those of you who have read Frankenstein might have also recalled that it was subtitled The Modern Prometheus. Alright, so in the traditional worldview, the universe is filled with intelligence. This intelligence manifests itself on all levels of nature, from animals, of which man is the highest, to spirits or pure mind, of which gods are the highest, and of which the elementals and the demons of the air are the closest to man. Okay, so this is just talking about the hierarchy. According to classical Hermeticism, nearly any spirit of superior intelligence and power likely to appear at a conjuration will be classed as a demon. This excludes the spirits of the dead, elemental demigods, which are an unclear category, and gods. Once again, we return to in one of the few pristine examples of this attitude still exists in Haiti, the spirits dealt with. In Latin American Santeria and Macumba, they're defined as the Orisha in the Yoruba tradition. Both these terms are usually translated as gods, and when white European types read about, they think about, they are reading about the worship of these gods. In fact, the relationship to these beings is far different than what white Christian culture is accustomed to. There's a direct communication and interaction. Okay, that's just what I want to get at. There is a direct communication and interaction with higher beings, with gods. This is normal in our culture. This is normal to us. I mean, not to the American Negro, the American motherfuckers. No, because we've been programmed steadily. But to the Haitians, the Jamaicans, they are in constant communication and interaction. Possession is an integral part of the practice and not considered in the least sinister. This is some African shit, nigga. Some Latin American shit. Niggas everywhere is doing this shit except us, because we've been tricked into not. We've been tricked into being scared of this shit. That's the fucked up shit. That's the shit that we got out here. Them got us going against our own nature. What we do naturally as people. Because we come from something that is pre-solar, something that is pre-physical, the fifth dimension and beyond. So, what is more, the spirits are not quite omniscient or omnipotent, even in their own fields. They need things from us, and as a result, deals are struck. Okay, so once again, I already have a whole lecture on the chakras. I already have a whole lecture on the deities. Y'all can go find that on YouTube once I put it out, actually. So let's keep this going. Alright, so this is just me giving you, another insight into the symbols. So we're talking about Dionysus, just connecting the whole Greek thing with the whole Christianity thing, and connecting these two cultures. And then by connecting these two cultures, I'm going to then go into today, the symbolism that they use today in all the movies and stuff like that. Now that I've told you and I've connected all these gods to the gods that everybody worships, okay, and shown how this science is being used against us in order to control us and keep us at ignorant level and keep us away from consciousness, keep us as slaves, keep us, our energy being used and things of that, keep this system in place and things of that nature. And anything conscious is deemed as evil because we come from something that is beyond this reality. That is the whole premise of this fucking lecture. That is everything. We come from something that is pre-physical, pre-solar. And everything in this physical reality that is set up as a part of this system is set up and geared towards